Hi everybody, welcome back to Political Excess. Today, let's cover my top 5 closest U.S. Senate races. I think at this point, most people are going to have the same top 5, but I did make a video about this early in March of this year, and it's actually going to result in the same top 5. Not in the same order, but the same top 5. So in that regard, I did do pretty well at predicting which ones are going to be extremely close. But this is it. This is the home stretch. Less than a week to go. Everyone is pulling out all the stops. People are campaigning for all these candidates. The last ads are starting to come out. The last-ditch attacks are also coming out just so these candidates can maybe tip the scales by an extra point or so at the last minute with any remaining swing voters or undecideds. We're also getting the polls pouring in here in the last week. But let's see where things stand in the top 5 closest U.S. Senate races. And number 5 for me is in New Hampshire. I also had this at number 5 back in March, and right now in the aggregate, Maggie Hassan is leading just over 3 points. We can see this graph has narrowed up until very recently. Hassan had a clear lead. Since then, Tulsi Gabbard has endorsed Don Bolduc, the Republican, and he's proving himself to not be the train wreck that Democrats had hoped. Look at the recent polls here. The St. Anselm poll actually shows Don Bolduc with a 1-point lead, 48 to 47. That is his only lead on all of these polls. The coefficient poll, the Republican aligned pollster, that has a tied race at 45 points. But all the other polls show Maggie Hassan with an edge. Sometimes it's only by a couple of points. Sometimes it's more than that. This looked like a seat Democrats were going to hold up until maybe the past week. Now it looks like they're probably going to still hold it. But Don Bolduc is pretty much right back in this race. How about if we go over to predict it and see what the markets are showing? That actually has narrowed up a ton, and it's at a 61 to 40 margin in favor of Hassan. That poll that showed Don Bolduc with a 1-point lead, that really spooked this market, and it's essentially a coin flip at this point, which is a little bit surprising. Maybe Bolduc still loses by 3 or 4 points, that's a possibility. But if Republicans actually flip this seat in a big red wave, it's not going to be a complete shocker out of nowhere anywhere, but it would be a massive, massive blow to the Democrats losing this seat. Let's go on to number 4, and that is Arizona. Right now in the aggregate, Mark Kelly is in the lead by about 2.5 to 3 points. But as we see in this graph, Kelly did have a clear lead for a long time. In the last few weeks, it's narrowed up. It's almost a dead heat at this point. Mark Kelly is definitely not at 50% in the aggregate. He's not even at 49, even 48%. Blake Masters has honed in on Mark Kelly. He's probably still at a slight disadvantage, but on election day, all bets are off. And if we go down to the individual polls, the big news was Mark Victor, that Libertarian candidate, has withdrawn from the race and endorsed Blake Masters. Mark Victor wasn't polling particularly high, but that could be enough to boost Masters by an additional 1 to 2 points, and that could be the deciding factor. The most recent polls are very close, 47 apiece from the Phillips Academy. Wick has Mark Kelly up by 2 points, 49 to 47. Fabrizio Lee and Associates, 1 point ahead for Mark Kelly. It's clear that Mark Kelly, being the incumbent all this time, really gave him an advantage in the polls. Blake Masters had that competitive primary. People weren't really sure who he was, but now he's been out there campaigning and making a name for himself. He's gotten some funding after some funding was pulled out, and this race absolutely could go either way. How about the market for this race? This has Blake Masters at 53 cents. Mark Kelly's at 49. Again, that indicates it's a pure toss-up. Let's move on to number 3, and that for me is Pennsylvania. Right now in the aggregate, John Fetterman is ahead by a little over 1%, 47.5 to about 46.5. And this graph tells a similar story. Fetterman, he had a large lead for many months, but I think his health has been a concern. I think the economy has helped propel Republicans. Dr. Oz has campaigned enough to try to get Republicans on board. After the debate performance, there's still not enough polls out, but I think that only could have hurt John Fetterman by a point or two. And this race is extremely close. It might even be a slight advantage for Dr. Oz come election day. If we take a look at these individual polls, Dr. Oz does have a slight lead in the last few. He's only at 48%, and some of these are from Republican pollsters. That Siena College New York Times poll, that's the best one recently for Fetterman. It shows him with a 5-point advantage at 49 to 44%. But as sad as it is, I think Fetterman's debate performance is going to cost him a little bit in the suburbs, a little bit with any undecided swing voters. Even just 1 percentage point, that is extremely crucial in this kind of a race. Let's check out this market. This has Dr. Oz at 64 cents. Fetterman is at 40. That's still close enough to where it can go either way for sure, but the momentum has been with Dr. Oz ever since that debate. Let's go on to number 2, and that is Nevada. Right now in the aggregate, Adam Laxalt is ahead by 0.3%, and this timeline is different than the other ones. This has been a back and forth race the entire year. It's a very prime pickup opportunity for the Republicans. I know there's concerns about Democrats being undersampled in the polling. That's a possibility as well. Let's take a look at these individual polls. And even in these most recent polls, very few of them have the candidates getting 50, 49, or even 48% of the vote. A lot of them are even in the mid-40s. The third-party candidates on the ballot, as well as voting for none of these candidates, it's going to draw a few points away from these main two competitors. There's really no way to predict which way this is going, but let's take a look at the market for this, and this has Adam Laxalt. He's at 69 cents, Catherine Cortez Masto's at 33. It's a little bit wider of a gap than I would expect with polling this tight. For me, it's almost a coin flip. If I had to pick, of course, I would give Adam Laxalt the slight edge due to the national environment, due to Cortez Masto not being really all that exciting. And it's also going to be about to see which way the trends are going in Nevada. That's a crucial state for the presidential election. And that governor's race, that's also going to be another one everybody's taking a look at. And finally, let's get on to number 1, and that, of course, is Georgia. And in the aggregate right now, Herschel Walker has just a very slight edge. And this graph also shows a very back-and-forth race the entire year. Once one candidate takes a lead for a week or two, then the other one comes back and takes the lead right back. If we go down to these individual polls, Herschel Walker is leading in most of the recent ones. But again, no one is hitting 50% of the vote, and that means it would go to a runoff in December. I would not count out Warnock either. He's definitely capable of winning this race. He's led in plenty of polls himself. It's really all going to come down to that election day turnout. And finally, let's take a look at that market, and that has Herschel Walker at 62 cents. Raphael Warnock's at 43 cents, so a slight edge there for Walker. So those are my top 5, and there's also a predicted market to see which Senate race will be closest, and this changes frequently. But right now, Georgia is in the lead at 22 cents, followed by Nevada, then Arizona, then New Hampshire, then Pennsylvania. So I don't think there's much debate about those 5 being the most competitive. There's still a few days left where something can change. Trump is out doing rallies. Obama is campaigning. Everybody's out there trying to get any kind of an edge they can. If Republicans win just 2 of those 5 seats, they will control the Senate. It would be hard to imagine them winning all 5 of them, but at this point that is definitely possible if it's a big enough red wave. But there's also a slight chance it could go the other way. Democrats hold all of them and pick up Pennsylvania. It's going to be very exciting. It's hard to make solid predictions given how narrow these races are. My best guess is Republicans will pick up at least 2 of these. I will have my final prediction videos coming out over the next few days. Be sure to check those out. Be sure to take a look at the updated polls, updated news, and let me know in the comments which of these races are you following most closely and which states do you think will flip. Let me know down below, and if you enjoy this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.